List the significant documents. I can summarize the ideas listed in the significant documents, and then last, connect the significant documents to the Constitution. That may not make sense right now. It should, but we'll give you a visual understanding of that. Set a timer for 15 minutes.
Okay, 15 minutes and counting.
The fundamental political principles, those are the ideas that are going to be in the documents that we're talking about today and probably in the next video and maybe even the third video. So what are the ideas in the documents? What are the documents? And then how do those documents connect to the U.S. Constitution? Let's roll. Fundamental political principles. This is a review from the day before. I'm not going to go too much into this. Might as well. Consider the government means people are the source of power. The next idea, limited government. The government cannot do anything it wants. This is the way it was when we created our government in 1787. It is the way it is now. Our government today, our government yesterday, and our government tomorrow. We have a democracy. People make decisions through voting. That's the way it was. That's the way it is. And that is the way it will be forever and ever. Amen. The rule of law. No one is above the law. Or you can also think of this as rule number one. Rule number one. Everyone must follow the law. The rule is that we must follow the law. If no one follows the law, we're going to have some problems. And then last, representative government. This is just a way to make our country function. It doesn't make sense to have people voting for every single issue every single day. So we pick a representative to represent us and vote for us. And then, so those are the fundamental political principles. We take all these ideas, put them together, and then they are written down in these 5 significant documents. These are the 5 significant documents that you need to know. Why do we need to know 5 significant documents? Because inside these documents, inside or written on these pieces of paper are the big ideas that are then taken and put into our U.S. Constitution, which is our government then, which is our government now, and what our government will be forever and ever. Amen. The ideas are in the documents and the Constitution. You know the Constitution. You know that one document. What about the 5 documents that led up to it? The precursor documentes. So 2 of them are English documents. And then 3 of the documents are American documents written in our country. Principles, documents, Constitution. Number 1, the Magna Carta. So before we talk about the Magna Carta, remember this is an English document. Let's understand that England had a monarchy. What is a monarchy? This form of government is basically having a king. And the king says, God picked me and everyone must do what I want. Sounds kind of silly. Sure, we have now exposed that silly idea and no one still follows monarchies. There are some monarchies that still exist, but most of them, they are in name only. Their kings are mainly just symbols or mascots for their country, or their queens are mascots. They have no legitimate power. They have no legislative power. They no longer make rules. They are just symbols where people parade around and they're basically meaningless. But it's easy for us to know that now, after years and years of democracy in America. But back then, they didn't have a lot of government ideas. There weren't fundamental political principles that were well known to every citizen. So this was the only thing that people knew. And so they accepted this bizarre idea that the king claimed that God picked him, and because the king had power and the king had an army, you pretty much did what the king said. So people didn't just say, oh, well, the king, God said they picked him. Well, they also followed the king because the king was strong, the king was powerful, the king had an army. And if you wanted to say, look, king, no one really picked you, the king would just kill you. You couldn't really just stand up to the king. It was very hard. But eventually, people got together and they got tired of the king being abusive. And then when it's 10, 20, 150, thousands of people in the country get together and say, you know what, king, we've been doing some thinking, and there's a lot of us, and there's only one of you. And even with your army, there's still more of us. So now that we have you outnumbered, we don't like this system. We don't care if God picked you. We don't like you abusing us and bullying us around. We're not a big fan of the monarchy. So at that point, the king realizes, all right, not in a good spot. So he comes to an agreement, says, all right, I still want to be king, but let's work out a deal. Let's have a social contract. Let me lead, let me rule, the king says, and I'll do some stuff for you. So the king and the people in the Magna Carta, this is basically a contract. The Magna Carta is a contract. This is the first significant document that we study, and this is really the first significant document in modern history where people have power. Now, the Greeks in ancient civilization and the Romans in ancient civilization, you have examples of republics and democracy, but when we talk about the modern world, in Western civilization, this is really the first document that details people having some power. This is one of our roots of the fundamental political principles. The Magna Carta, written in 1215 in England, is a contract between the people and the government. And King John says, all right, I'll give you some rights if you just chill out and don't kill me. That's basically it. The king's doing whatever he wants until he realizes, oh, I'm in some hot water here. They might kill me. I better give them something to calm them down. And that is detailed in the Magna Carta. And now you get the idea of the rule of law. The rule of law is invented or created, or at the very least, it's finally accepted and becomes actual law and a principle that everyone will follow. It's in the Magna Carta. So when we have the rule of law and that concept of the rule that everyone must follow the law and no one's above the law, we have that U.S. Constitution. Its origin, for the most part, in Western civilization or in America and in Europe, its roots trace to this 1215 document. 800 years ago, we first write about the rule of law and put it into action, and people agree to follow it. Rights to a trial. Seems obvious today. Everything has to start somewhere. We will steal that idea. Remember, we have these ideas. They're written in a bunch of documents. We steal all the best ideas and we put them into the U.S. Constitution. Rich people have rights. It sounds absurd. Like, how's that a good thing? What about the middle class? What about the poor? You got to start somewhere. Realize that in 1215, only the king really had rights. No one had rights. You're not going to go from the king only having rights to everyone having rights. There are baby steps. And you can even see that in American history. You look at the original American history, only really the rich, wealthy landowners could vote. And suffrage, or the right to vote, would slowly spread to other groups in society. From the rich to the middle class to blacks to women, it expands slowly. There's baby steps. You can't just have everything all at once. So this is good because this is an example of rights and power. It's a slow, long process, but also an example of people getting more rights. There it is, 1215. This is a first major step. The Magna Carta is a big document that we need to understand, heavily influences our Constitution. Number 2, and we're doing these in chronological order. The next document is the Charter of the Virginia Company of London. This is an American document that will influence the U.S. Constitution. So in 1607, several years, about 400 years after the Magna Carta, people are living in England. It's the most powerful nation in the world. They're going to move to the United States. There's no United States, though, to North America. And there's no real North America. They're going to go over to the New World. They want to go to the New World. They're going to establish the colony of Jamestown in America, in Virginia. Now, they're not going to America to create America. They're not going to America to create Jamestown. They're not going to really create a new government or any of these things. The only reason they're going over there is for jobs, jobs. They're going to create jobs and for an opportunity. There aren't very many jobs in England. They're not doing so well in England. So they go to Jamestown for work. Just like you may move somewhere someday for work. You may move overseas for work. And that's a good point. What if you were going to go move to Iraq right now? Or Syria? Maybe there's a job opportunity in Syria, over in the Middle East. Well, you might be worried because it's not safe and maybe your rights aren't protected. You're going to make a lot of money. There's job opportunities there because there's probably not a job opportunity where you're living right now. You want to go to Syria to earn some money, but you're not going to do it unless someone guarantees your safety and unless someone guarantees that your rights will be protected. And in this case, these people that are moving to Jamestown, not only are they worried about not having their rights protected, they're not only worried about safety, but they're worried that some of them actually are slaves. And they're worried that they're going to go, oh no, I know it's crazy to think, wait, white people were slaves? Yes, everyone's been slaves. It's not just black people. Slavery has existed since the beginning of man. Slavery is older than freedom. Think about that. Being free, that's a relatively new concept. A concept that's always existed is slavery, and people have been enslaving each other. When you conquer a nation, you enslave those people. Slavery has existed since the beginning of time, and everyone has enslaved everyone. Whites have enslaved whites, Asians have enslaved Asians, blacks have enslaved blacks, blacks have enslaved whites. We have this idea in America that only black people are the slaves because that is the most significant part of American history. When we think of slavery from the American perspective, we think of the big time black African slavery in the South. That is true. But the original slaves coming to America were white slaves. We've created a new word. Well, not a new word, but we also call them indentured servants, but they were slaves. They were afraid that they would come to America and never be free. And so they wanted to have their rights protected. They wanted some guarantees so that they wouldn't always be slaves. So they create a document, and it's called the Virginia Charter. A charter is just a fancy word for a document. And in this document, you have the rights of Englishmen are guaranteed. So they say, hey, if I'm going to go to Jamestown, I want a contract, I want a document, and in that document, you're going to guarantee me all the stuff that I have in the Magna Carta. All the rights that I have in England, I want those rights in America. I also want to have a representative government. I want to be able to pick somebody that will represent Jamestown and then be able to go over to England and vote and make laws. I don't, because really they're all Englishmen. They're in America. They're not Americans. They're still Englishmen that are just living and working overseas. And while they're living and working overseas, they still want to be able to make laws in England, because England is making laws that are influencing England and Ireland and that are affecting all of the colonies around the world, especially right here. The laws that England passes are the laws that influence Jamestown. So these guys want to make sure that they can elect leaders that can represent them. So the Charter of the Virginia Company of London, some of these key principles or basic government ideas in this document that we rip off are rights, which are established in the Magna Carta, which then are written in the Charter. So it's written in the Magna Carta, then it's rewritten in the Charter of the Virginia Company of London, and then it's rewritten in the Constitution. The idea of a representative government is written in the Charters of Company of Virginia. It's in that document, and then we rip that off and steal it in the Constitution. It's called plagiarism when you do this in schoolwork and you get in trouble, but apparently when our government and founding fathers, which we adore, do it, it's okay. It's okay for Thomas Jefferson to steal ideas, but if you do it, you're going to fail. Dims the brakes. English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights is kind of like, wait, didn't we just do this with the Magna Carta? Well, here's the thing. So Magna Carta written in 1215, over time, new kings come, new kings go. And then the latest king here is like, this contract, I don't really like it anymore. The people have lost some of their power. He's not really worried about it anymore. It's like, this Magna Carta is stupid. Rule of law is stupid. Right to a trial is stupid. Rights for the rich is stupid. The king starts ignoring the Magna Carta, and the people are like, what? You can't just ignore the Magna Carta. You can't just act like this document doesn't exist. Well, he is. And so they're like, what? And they take arms. And so England has this civil war. It goes back and forth. It's really confusing. Well, it's not super confusing, but it's much more confusing than the American Civil War. American Civil War is pretty straightforward. The English Civil War, it's like they kill this dude and then this guy takes power, but then these guys aren't happy. Then they take over and this guy's like, no, we're cool. And then they kick him out again. It's good thing we're studying American history. So they yell at the king, and then they pretty much kill the king, and a new king comes in because they can't figure out what they're going to do. Like I said, this English Civil War is going back and forth, and eventually a new king comes in. This new guy, he says, hey, everybody chill out. I'll be your king. His name's William of Orange. He says, whoa. Let's calm down. Let me be king, and I'll bring the Magna Carta back, but in a new, improved form. That's right. I'm going to make it better. So let me be your new king, please, and I'll give you rights. And we call this the English Bill of Rights. This is written in 1689. Again, another document that talks about fundamental political principles that the Americans will rip off. They create the idea of separation of power. The king will have power, but there will also be an elected government with power. It is separated. This guy does one thing, this guy does one thing, and they even each other out. You got a king, but you got a government, and they even each other out. We separate the power. Instead of one person who makes all the decisions, it could abuse people. We have two groups that have to learn to work together. Separation of power, written in the English Bill of Rights, we rip that off. Obviously, we'll rip it off and create three branches of power. Limited government. Hey, I've heard that before. Yes, we will limit the power of the government. Pretty obvious there, right? Government is weak. He can't do everything he wants to do. Democratic elections, voting, yeah, that seems pretty obvious. That is in the English Bill of Rights. This is the new king takes over and starts guaranteeing rights for the people. We will steal all the ideas. Hey, freedom of speech, I've heard of that before. Where did it come from? We got it in our U.S. Constitution because we stole it from the English Bill of Rights in 1689. So separation of powers, limiting the government's power, voting, freedom of speech, just to name a few. Oh, but there's more. Wow, William of Orange, you're such a great guy. Oh, the timer is going off, but we'll finish up real quick. Can't torture people. We also take that. We put it in our U.S. Constitution. Do you remember what amendment it was? It was in the Bill of Rights. That means it's in the top 10. What number is it? You don't really have to remember the numbers. It's not super important. Number 8, the 8th Amendment of our U.S. Constitution says we cannot torture you. The government cannot torture you. You also have the right to own weapons, you Englishmen. The English Bill of Rights protects the right to bear arms. And we will steal that idea and we will put it in our Second Amendment. Again, wrapping up. Ideas, wrote them down, and then we rip them off. Ideas and these 5 documents, and then they all influence our U.S. Constitution. See you in the next video.